My son didn't show up to his mother's funeral. The sentence didn't sound real, even as it settled quietly in my mind, like dust on polished wood. I stood beside the casket, my hands folded neatly in front of me, the way I'd practiced all morning in the mirror. The chapel smelled faintly of lilies and floor polish. Soft organ music drifted through the air, the kind that was meant to comfort, though it never really did. People had already begun to fill the pews. Neighbors, distant relatives, a few of Helen's old friends from church. Everyone had come. Everyone except Daniel. I checked my watch. 10:12 a.m. The service had started 12 minutes ago. He was late. That was all. Just late. Daniel had always been a little careless with time. Even as a boy, he used to rush down the stairs at the last minute, one shoe half-tied, hair still damp from a hurried shower. Helen would laugh and fix his collar while I grabbed the car keys. "He'll grow out of it," she used to say. I believed her. I always believed her. I shifted slightly, my heels pressing into the carpet beneath me. The pastor's voice moved steadily through a passage about love and endurance, something from Corinthians, I think. I nodded at the right moments. I even managed a small, polite smile when someone touched my shoulder in sympathy. But my eyes kept drifting toward the back doors. Every time they creaked open, my heart reacted before my mind could stop it. But it was never him. Just more guests slipping in quietly. At 10:25, my sister-in-law leaned closer and whispered, "Is Daniel on his way?" Her voice was gentle, careful. I kept my gaze forward. "He must be," I said. "Must be." The words sounded complete, finished, like something solid, but they didn't feel that way. By 10:40, the front rows were full. The chapel had settled into that stillness that only comes when something final is being acknowledged. People stopped shifting, stopped whispering. Even the air seemed to hold itself differently. Daniel's seat remained empty. Second row, left side, a small white card with his name printed in black ink. Reserved. I had written it myself last night. I glanced at it once, then again. It didn't change. The pastor invited me to speak. I hadn't planned to, but I walked up anyway. The podium felt too tall, or maybe I just felt smaller than usual. I adjusted the microphone slightly. "My name is Margaret Collins," I said, my voice steady, almost distant to my own ears. "Helen was my wife for 42 years. A pause. I could feel people watching me, waiting for something, tears perhaps, or a break in my voice. I gave them neither. "She liked her coffee too strong," I continued, "and she always left the kitchen light on, even when she knew I'd turn it off right behind her." A few soft chuckles. I let the silence sit for a moment. "She believed in showing up," I said, "no matter what." That was all. I stepped away from the podium before my hands could decide to tremble. The rest of the service passed in fragments. Hymns, words, nods, handshakes. At some point, someone pressed a small paper cup of water into my hand. I held it for a while before realizing I hadn't taken a sip. By the time we reached the cemetery, the sky had shifted into that pale gray that never quite decides whether it wants to rain. The wind picked up just enough to move the edges of coats and scarves. People gathered in a loose circle. The casket was lowered slowly, deliberately. I kept my eyes on it. Not because I wanted to, because there was nowhere else to look. Still no Daniel. When it was over, people came to me one by one. "I'm so sorry. She was a wonderful woman. If you need anything." I nodded, thanked them, repeated the same small phrases that seemed expected. Someone asked again, "Is your son okay?" I gave the same answer. He must be delayed. Must be. By the time the last car pulled away, the cemetery had grown quiet again. Just wind and distance. I stood there a little longer than necessary. Then I walked back to my car. The drive home took 23 minutes. I know that because I checked the clock when I pulled into the driveway. 1:17 p.m. The house felt exactly as it had that morning. Too still. I set my keys down in the same place I always did, took off my coat, hung it carefully. The kitchen light was still on. I turned it off, then turned it back on again. I'm not sure why. My phone had been silent all day. I hadn't checked it during the service, or at the cemetery. There hadn't been time. Or maybe I hadn't made time. I picked it up now. One missed call. Unknown number. No voicemail. No messages from Daniel. I stared at his name in my contacts for a moment. Then I didn't press it. Instead, my thumb moved without much thought. Opened Facebook. The screen loaded slowly, then all at once. The first thing I saw was a photo. Bright. Almost aggressively bright. Blue water stretching endlessly behind a white railing. Sunlight reflecting off glass. A table set with drinks. Colorful. Layered. Garnished with slices of fruit. And there he was. Daniel. Sunglasses. A loose linen shirt. One arm draped casually around Vanessa's shoulders. She was laughing. He was smiling. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. The caption read, "Finally taking that break we needed. Caribbean vibes." Posted. 2 hours ago. 2 hours. I looked at the timestamp again, then at the photo, then back at the time. The service had started at 10. This was posted around 11:15, while I was standing at the podium, while Helen's casket was still open.
While people were asking where he was, I didn't scroll. I didn't need to. There were more photos beneath it. I could see the edges of them, but I stopped there.
My hand didn't shake. It didn't do anything at all. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, carefully, like it might break if I didn't. The house was quiet again, exactly the same as before. Only now, something inside it had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. I walked to the sink and rinsed the cup someone had given me earlier, even though it was already clean. Set it upside down on the rack, dried my hands. Then I stood there for a moment, looking out the window at the empty backyard. The wind moved through the trees. Nothing else moved. I didn't call him. Not yet. Because something about that photo didn't feel sudden. It felt arranged, planned. And I've learned over the years that the most important truths are rarely the ones people say out loud. They're the ones they think you'll never notice. The next morning, I woke up at 5:42. Not because I had somewhere to be, just because that's when my body decided the day had started. For 42 years, Helen used to wake up 10 minutes after me. She'd shuffle into the kitchen in her robe, her hair still pressed flat on one side, and ask the same question every morning. Did you already make coffee? And every morning I had 2 cups, always 2. I still made 2 the next day, out of habit, I suppose. The second cup sat untouched on the counter until it went cold. By 7 a.m., the house had settled into its usual quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, the other kind, the one that lingers. I rinsed both cups, dried them carefully, and placed them back on the same hooks beneath the cabinet. Everything stayed where it belonged. That part hadn't changed. I opened the refrigerator. Half a carton of eggs, a container of leftover soup someone had dropped off after the funeral, milk that would expire in 3 days. I closed it again without taking anything out. Instead, I reached for a piece of toast. Plain. Helen used to say I had no imagination when it came to breakfast. She wasn't wrong. At 8:15, I sat at the small kitchen table by the window. Same chair, same spot. The newspaper lay folded beside me, untouched. My phone rested face down. I didn't check it. Not yet. Outside, the neighbor's sprinkler clicked on in steady intervals. Water hitting pavement, then grass, then pavement again. Predictable. Reliable.
I finished the toast and brushed the crumbs into the sink. Then I picked up the phone. No missed calls, no messages. Nothing from Daniel. I turned the screen off, set it back down. At 9 o'clock, I went upstairs and opened Helen's closet. Her clothes were still arranged by color. She'd insisted on that. Light to dark. Always. I ran my hand lightly across the fabric of a blue cardigan she wore every Sunday. Then I closed the door again. There was no reason to leave it open. By late morning, I found myself standing in the living room without remembering how I got there. The sunlight came through the same window it always had, landing on the same spot on the rug. I adjusted the curtains slightly, not because they needed adjusting, just because I could. Around noon, I checked the mail. A utility bill, a flyer from the local grocery store, and a glossy envelope addressed to Daniel Collins. Forwarding label. New address, Miami, Florida. I held it for a moment longer than necessary, then placed it on the entry table. He hadn't mentioned moving, not directly. There had been comments, of course. Things are expanding, better opportunities down south. Vanessa had said most of it, always with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I walked back into the kitchen and opened the cabinet where we kept the checkbook. It was still there, same place. Balance, $3,842. I ran my finger along the numbers as if they might change under pressure. They didn't. Helen had managed most of it in recent years. Bills, accounts, small adjustments that kept everything running smoothly. I knew how to do it. Of course I did. But knowing how and doing it well were not the same thing. I sat down again, opened the checkbook, closed it. There was time. There was always time. In the afternoon, I turned on the television, left it on a low volume. Didn't watch it. The sound filled the room just enough to make it feel less empty. At 2:30, I picked up my phone again, opened the same app. Daniel's post was still there. More likes now, more comments. Living your best life. So happy for you both. Much deserved vacation. I scrolled this time. Another photo, this one closer. Vanessa all in a drink. Her nails perfectly done, sunlight catching the ring on her finger. Daniel in the background, mid-laugh, relaxed, unbothered. I noticed the timestamp on that one, posted 20 minutes after the first. Then another, a video, the sound of waves, music, laughter. I stopped it before it finished, closed the app, set the phone down again, face down this time. At 3:10, I walked into the garage. Helen's old gardening tools were still lined up along the wall. She had labeled everything, small white stickers with neat handwriting, pruning shears, fertilizer, gloves, size M. I picked up the gloves. They still held the shape of her hands. I placed them back exactly where they had been. At 4, I made dinner, if it could be called that. Soup, heated slowly on the stove. I poured it into a bowl, sat at the table, ate half, left the rest. The chair across from me remained empty. It didn't need to be acknowledged. It was simply there. After dinner, I washed the bowl, dried it, put it away. Routine. That was the word Helen used. Routine keeps things steady, she'd say. She believed in that. I did too. Up to a point. At 6:15, the sun began to set. The light shifted across the kitchen floor, stretching longer, thinner. I stood by the window again, same place as that morning. My phone was still on the counter. I picked it up, opened my contacts, scrolled to Daniel. His name sat there, unchanged. I pressed it this time, held the phone to my ear. It rang once, then went to voicemail. His voice. Cheerful. Recorded months ago. Hey, it's Daniel. Leave a message. I didn't. I ended the call. Set the phone down again. Slowly. Then I walked to the living room and turned off the television. The house returned to silence. Complete silence. Not even the faint hum of background noise. Just stillness. I stood there for a moment. Then I walked back to the kitchen. The envelope with his new address was still on the table. I picked it up, turned it over, examined the label more closely this time. It hadn't just been forwarded. It had been updated. Officially. That takes time. Planning. Paperwork. Not something done overnight. I set the envelope back down, in the exact same place. Then I looked at the phone again, at the black screen reflecting a version of me that looked unchanged. And that was the part that felt the most unusual. Because somewhere between the funeral and that photograph, something had already been decided. Not by me. There had been a dinner, 3 weeks before Helen passed. At the time, it felt ordinary. Looking back, it doesn't. It was a Sunday evening. Cold outside, but not enough for snow. The kind of gray day that settles over everything without asking permission. Helen had insisted we host. Just something small, she said. It's been a while since we've seen Daniel. She said his name the way she always did. Softly. Like it still belonged to the boy who used to run through the backyard with scraped knees and grass stains. I didn't correct her. I never did. By 5:30, the house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. Helen had been in the kitchen since noon, moving slowly but deliberately, taking breaks more often than she used to. I told her we could order something instead. She shook her head. He likes this. Present tense.
I set the table while she rested. 4 plates, 4 glasses, cloth napkins folded the way she liked, clean edges, no creases. Daniel and Vanessa arrived at 6:12. Late. Not unusual. But they didn't apologize. Vanessa walked in first, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like she owned the rhythm of the house. She wore a cream coat that didn't quite match the weather, too light for winter, too heavy for fall. Daniel followed behind her, holding his phone in one hand. He didn't look up immediately. "Hey," he said, almost as an afterthought. Helen smiled, the kind of smile that forgives before anything needs forgiving. "You made it," she said. Vanessa kissed the air near Helen's cheek, not quite touching. "Of course," she replied. "We wouldn't miss it." Her voice was smooth, practiced. Daniel gave me a brief nod. "Hi, Mom." I nodded back. "Dinner's ready," I said. We sat. The table looked exactly as it should. Everything in place, nothing missing. At least, that's how it appeared. Vanessa glanced at her phone before picking up her fork. Daniel did the same. Helen noticed. She always noticed. But she didn't say anything. She never did. "How's work?" she asked instead, her voice light, carefully placed. Daniel shrugged. "Busy." One word. He used to talk more than that. Used to fill the room with details we didn't always understand, but listened to anyway. Vanessa added, "Things are expanding." She said it like a headline. No explanation followed. "That's good," Helen said. She reached for the serving dish and placed a piece of chicken on Daniel's plate. He didn't look at it, just kept scrolling. "You should try this," she added gently. "It's your favorite." He nodded. "Yeah." Didn't take a bite. I watched the space between them, not the physical distance, that hadn't changed. The other kind, the kind you don't measure with inches. Vanessa finally set her phone down. "I actually wanted to talk to you both about something," she said. Helen's expression brightened slightly. "Oh?" Vanessa folded her hands together on the table, controlled. "We've been thinking about relocating," she said. "There are better opportunities in Florida, Miami specifically." Helen paused, just for a second. "Relocating?" she repeated. Daniel didn't look up. "It's not final," he said. "Just something we're considering." Vanessa smiled. "It makes sense for us." "Us." Helen nodded slowly. "That's a big change." "It's a smart one," Vanessa replied. No hesitation, no room left for discussion. I took a sip of water. Cold. Clear. Neutral. "When were you planning to tell us?" I asked. Daniel finally looked up. A brief glance. Then back down. "We're telling you now." Not incorrect. Just incomplete. Helen placed her fork down carefully. "I see," she said. Her voice didn't change, but her hands did. Just slightly. She folded them in her lap instead of keeping them on the table. A small adjustment. Easy to miss. Vanessa continued. "There's also the house," she said. Daniel shifted in his seat. Barely noticeable, but it was there. "What about it?" I asked. Vanessa tilted her head. "We were thinking it might not make sense for you to maintain something this size long term." Helen didn't respond immediately. The room held its breath. "I've managed it just fine," she said finally. Still calm, still polite. Vanessa smiled again, that same careful smile. "I'm sure you have. But things change." Daniel cleared his throat. "Vanessa's just saying it might be easier to simplify." Simplify. An interesting word. Helen nodded once. "I'll think about it," she said. Which meant she wouldn't. Which meant she understood exactly what was being suggested. Dinner continued. Or something like it. Conversations moved around the table, never quite landing anywhere. Vanessa spoke more than Daniel. She always had. He followed. She led. That part had changed. Slowly. Then all at once. At one point, Helen excused herself to the kitchen. I watched her go. Her steps were slower than usual, measured. Daniel didn't notice. Vanessa did, but she didn't move. "I'll check on her," I said, standing. Vanessa nodded. "Of course." I found Helen at the counter, her hands resting lightly on the edge. She wasn't doing anything, just standing. "She's tired," she said before I could speak. "I know." "She means well." I didn't respond. Helen turned slightly, looking past me toward the dining room. "They're building a life," she added. "Yes. And we're not part of it anymore." It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything to correct. When we returned to the table, Vanessa was laughing at something on her phone. Daniel leaned in closer to see, their heads nearly touching. Helen sat down again, smiled, picked up her fork, didn't eat. The rest of the evening passed without incident. No raised voices, no arguments, just small moments, too small to call out, too many to ignore. When they left, Vanessa hugged Helen again, light, brief. "We'll keep you updated," she said. Daniel gave a quick wave. "Drive safe," Helen replied. The door closed. The house returned to quiet. Helen stood there for a moment. Then she walked back to the kitchen and began clearing the table. I helped. We didn't speak. Not because we couldn't, because there was nothing left that hadn't already been said, without words. 3 weeks later, she was gone. And now, standing in that same kitchen, with the same table, the same chairs, and the same silence, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to fully see before. That dinner hadn't been a conversation. It had been a decision, one that had already been made. The envelope stayed where I left it. 2 days passed. I didn't move it. Not because I forgot, because I didn't want to disturb whatever it represented. On the third morning, I picked it up again. Same weight, same gloss, same printed label. Daniel Collins, forwarded to Miami, Florida. I turned it over slowly. The seal was still intact. I could have opened it. Legally, maybe not, but practically, no one would have known. I placed it back down. Then I went to the drawer beside the refrigerator, the one Helen used for paperwork. It opened with the same soft resistance it always had. Inside, folders stacked neatly. Bills, insurance,
bank statements, everything labeled, everything in her handwriting. I pulled out the most recent bank statement, sat down at the kitchen table. The chair across from me stayed empty. I unfolded the paper. The numbers were clean, predictable. Utilities, groceries, insurance. Then something else. A withdrawal. $1,200. 2 weeks ago. I frowned slightly. Helen didn't withdraw cash. She never liked it. Too easy to lose track, she used to say. I flipped back one page. Another withdrawal. $1,200. 3 weeks ago. Same amount. Same pattern. I ran my finger along the dates. 3 weeks ago. That was the week of the dinner. The one with Daniel and Vanessa. I leaned back slightly. The chair creaked under my weight. A small sound in a quiet room. I stood up and walked to the cabinet again. Pulled out the checkbook. Flipped through it. No record of those withdrawals. Helen wrote everything down. Even small amounts. Especially small amounts. This wasn't small. I closed the checkbook. Set it down. Then I went to the hallway closet. Reached up to the top shelf. The lockbox was still there. Same combination. I opened it. Inside, documents, old photos, a small velvet pouch, and a second checkbook. Unused. I checked the balance slip. Unchanged. So the withdrawals hadn't come from here. I closed the box. Locked it. Put it back. When I returned to the kitchen, the envelope was still on the table. Unmoved. I sat down again. This time I opened my phone. Not social media. Contacts. Scrolled past Daniel. Stopped at another name. Wells Fargo local branch. Helen had saved it years ago. I pressed call. It rang twice. A woman answered. Professional. Neutral. Good morning, how can I help you? I gave my name. Explained just enough. Never everything. She asked for verification. I provided it. There was a pause. Typing. Mrs. Collins, she said. Those withdrawals were made in person. I didn't respond immediately. In person? I repeated. Yes, ma'am. Another pause. Do you recall making those transactions? No. More typing. Then, they were authorized with ID. ID. I looked down at the table. At my hands. Still. Unchanged. Whose ID? I asked. I'm sorry, I can't disclose that over the phone. Of course not. I understand. I said.
And I did. I ended the call, set the phone down. The room felt exactly the same. Nothing had shifted. Nothing had changed. Except something had. I stood up, walked to the hallway, then upstairs. Helen's dresser. Top drawer. I opened it. Her wallet was still there. Brown leather, worn at the edges. I picked it up, opened it. Driver's license, insurance card, everything in place.
Nothing missing. I closed it, set it back, exactly where it had been. Then I noticed something else. On the nightstand, a small stack of papers, folded once, neatly. I picked them up, unfolded them slowly. Medical forms, appointment summaries, dates, times, and one note, handwritten, not Helen's. The handwriting was sharper, more angled. A phone number, no name, just 10 digits. I stared at it. Then I turned the paper over. Nothing on the back. I folded it again, placed it in my pocket. When I went back downstairs, the light had shifted again. Late afternoon, long shadows across the floor. I sat at the table, looked at the envelope, then at my phone, then at the number in my pocket. I didn't call it. Not yet. Instead, I opened Facebook again. Daniel's post had more comments, more reactions. Someone had written, "Enjoy Miami before the next stop." I paused, scrolled up, checked the location tag. Not just Caribbean, Miami Beach. Posted before the cruise photos. Earlier that same day. I checked the time. 9:02 a.m. The funeral had started at 10. I leaned back slowly. Let the numbers settle. Let the timeline arrange itself. Miami at 9. Caribbean by 11. A flight. An early one. Planned. Booked. Not last minute. Not spontaneous. I set the phone down. Carefully. The envelope. The withdrawals. The forwarding address. The location tag. The dinner. Vanessa's voice. It makes sense for us. I stood up, walked to the sink, turned on the water, let it run. Cold, clear, steady. Then I turned it off, dried my hands, looked out the window again. Same yard, same trees. Nothing out of place. And that was the problem. Because when everything looks exactly the same, that's usually when something has already been changed. The next morning, I didn't make 2 cups of coffee. Just one. I drank it standing up. No table. No chair. No newspaper. The phone number was still in my pocket. Folded once. Unremarkable. I placed it on the counter beside the envelope. Looked at both. Then I picked up my keys. By 8:30, I was at the bank. The same branch Helen had used for years. Brick building. Neutral colors. A flag out front that moved just enough to remind you there was wind. Inside, everything smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and something synthetic. I approached the counter. The woman from the phone wasn't there. A man greeted me instead. Mid-30s. Clean tie. Measured smile. "How can I help you today?" I gave my name again. Slid my ID across the counter. "I need to review recent withdrawals," I said. He nodded. Typed. Clicked. turned the screen slightly toward himself, not me. Standard procedure. There were 2 withdrawals, he said. 1,200 each. I know. He hesitated. Is there a concern? I looked at him. Steady. Yes. Another pause. Those transactions were completed with proper identification. He added carefully. I understand. He waited. I didn't fill the silence. Eventually he did. If you believe there's been unauthorized activity, we can file a report. I considered that. Then I shook my head. Not yet. Not yet meant something. It meant I wasn't done looking. He printed the receipts, slid them across the counter. I didn't touch them immediately. Just looked. Signature line. Name. Margaret Collins. The handwriting was close. Close enough to pass. But not mine. I picked them up. Folded them once. Placed them in my purse. Thank you. He nodded. Let us know if you need anything further. I walked out. The air outside felt colder than it should have. By 9:15, I was back in the car. I didn't start it right away. Instead, I took out my phone, opened my email, scrolled. There it was. A message from an airline. Subject line. Your upcoming itinerary has been confirmed. I frowned. Opened it. Passenger. Daniel Collins. Departure. Chicago O'Hare. Destination. Miami. Date. 3 weeks ago. The morning after that dinner. I read it twice. Then a third time. Forwarded. From Helen's email. Sent to Daniel. No response attached. Just confirmation. I checked the timestamp. Sent at 6:12 a.m. Helen had been awake early that day. I remember that. She said she couldn't sleep. Now I knew what she had been doing.
I scrolled further. Another email. Different airline. Passenger. Daniel Collins. Destination. San Juan. Departure. The morning of the funeral. I sat back. Let the pieces settle. Miami first. Then the Caribbean. Not a last-minute decision. A sequence. Planned. Layered. I closed the email. Opened the browser. Typed in Vanessa's name. Scrolled. Professional profile. Consulting firm. Location. Recently updated. Miami, Florida. Effective date. 1 month ago. I stared at the screen. Then I closed it. By the time I got home, the house looked exactly as I had left it. Unchanged. Predictable. I placed my purse on the table, took out the receipts, laid them beside the envelope. Then I added the folded paper with the phone number. 3 items. Side by side. Unrelated. Except they weren't. I walked to the cabinet again, pulled out Helen's old planner. She kept everything there. Appointments. Notes. Reminders. I flipped to 3 weeks ago. The day after that dinner. There was a note. Small. Almost easy to miss. Bank.
10 a.m. No details. No explanation. Below it, another line. Different ink. Daniel. Flight? A question mark. I traced the ink with my finger, pressed slightly, as if it might reveal more. It didn't. But the question remained. Helen had known something. Not everything, but enough to ask. I closed the planner, set it down. Then I picked up the phone number again. This time, I dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, a voicemail. Not Daniel. Not Vanessa. A woman. This is Coastal Property Management. Please leave a message. I didn't. I ended the call. Opened the browser again. Typed the name. Scrolled. Listings. Rental properties. Short-term leases. Miami Beach. I went back to the envelope. Looked at the address again. It wasn't a permanent residence. It was a unit. Temporary. I exhaled slowly. Then I opened Facebook again. Not Daniel's profile this time. Vanessa's. Her posts were curated, polished, intentional. But timelines don't lie. 3 weeks ago. A photo. Boxes. Caption. Big changes ahead. Comments. Excitement. Encouragement. I checked the date. The same week as the withdrawals. The same week as the flight. The same week as the dinner. I zoomed in on the image. One box had a label. Handwritten. Documents. Another. Personal. Keep. I closed the image. Scrolled further. Nothing else. Clean. Too clean. I set the phone down. Then I looked at the 3 items on the table again. Envelope. Receipts. Phone number. I added a 4th. Helen's planner. Open to that page. Everything aligned. Not perfectly, but close enough. And close was all it needed to be. I walked to the sink, turned on the water, watched it run. Then I turned it off again, dried my hands. Slowly, deliberately. I didn't feel angry. That would have been simpler. This was something else. Quieter. More precise. Because this wasn't about a missed funeral. It wasn't even about a vacation. It was about timing, movement, preparation, and absence. The kind that doesn't happen by accident. I picked up the envelope one last time, turned it over, then placed it back exactly where it had been. Nothing out of place. Nothing disturbed. From the outside, everything still looked the same. And that was exactly how they intended it. I knew then, something much bigger was already in motion.
I didn't touch anything on the table the next morning. The envelope, the receipts, the planner, the number. All of it remained exactly where I had left it. I moved around them instead. Made coffee. 1 cup. Set it down. Didn't drink it right away. I stood there, looking at the arrangement like it might rearrange itself if I waited long enough. It didn't. Things rarely do. What changes is the way you see them. I sat down slowly, pulled the planner closer, opened it again to that same page. Bank, 10 a.m. Daniel, flight? I read those 2 lines again. This time, I didn't look at them separately. I looked at them together. Helen had gone to the bank. The same week money was withdrawn. She had questioned a flight. The same week Daniel left. That wasn't coincidence. Helen didn't write questions unless she already suspected the answer. I closed the planner. Then I picked up the receipts, held them side by side. 2 withdrawals, 2 different days, same amount, same signature, almost identical, 2 identical. That was the detail that stayed with me. Helen's handwriting had always been soft, rounded. These signatures were tighter, more controlled, like someone trying to stay inside the lines. I placed them back down. Then I reached for my phone, opened the photos again. Not to look at Daniel, not this time. Vanessa. I zoomed in. Her hand, the ring, the nails. Perfect. Always perfect. Then I noticed something else. Her wrist. A bracelet. Thin. Gold. I had seen it before. Not recently. Earlier. At dinner. 3 weeks ago. She had worn it then. And Helen had noticed. I remembered the way Helen's eyes had lingered for just a second too long. Not admiration. Recognition. I leaned back. Let the memory settle. Helen had said very little that night. But she had watched. Carefully. The way she always did when something didn't feel right. I stood up, walked to the hallway, then to the small cabinet where Helen kept her jewelry. I opened it. Inside, everything was arranged in small compartments. Necklaces, earrings, bracelets. I looked for the gold one. Simple, thin. There was an empty space. Not large, but noticeable. I didn't search the rest. I didn't need to. I closed the cabinet, returned to the kitchen, sat down again. The pieces didn't come together all at once. They never do. They align gradually, quietly, like something falling into place behind you while you're facing the other direction. The dinner, the withdrawals, the flight, the forwarding address, the bracelet, the planner, Vanessa's voice. It makes sense for us. Daniel's silence. Not confusion. Not hesitation. Silence. I picked up the phone again, opened Daniel's profile, scrolled past the photos, past the comments, to the older posts. Months back. There had been fewer of them. Less detail. Less presence. Then gradually, more. But not from him. From her. Tagged. Shared. Controlled. The narrative had shifted. Not suddenly. Step by step. Until it no longer belonged to him at all. I noticed something else. A comment. Buried. From someone I didn't recognize. Congrats on locking it all in before the move. I read it twice. Then once more. No reply. No clarification. Just left there. Like something that wasn't meant to be noticed. I closed the app. Set the phone down. Then I reached for the envelope again. Turned it over. Looked at the address more closely this time. Unit number. Short-term lease. Managed property. Not a home. A transition point. I thought about the timing again. 3 weeks. That was all it had taken. From dinner to departure. But planning something like that doesn't take 3 weeks. It takes longer. Which meant it had already been in motion before they sat at my table. Before Helen placed that plate in front of him. Before she asked, "How's work?" I stood up, walked to the sink, turned on the water, let it run. Then I turned it off again. The silence returned immediately. I dried my hands. Slowly. Deliberately.
Then I looked at the chair across from me. Empty. Unchanged. Helen had seen it. Not everything, but enough. Enough to go to the bank. Enough to write that question. Enough to notice the bracelet. And she hadn't said anything. Not directly. She had stayed quiet. Observed. Waited. I understood that now. Because speaking too early changes the outcome. And silence reveals more than questions ever do.
I walked back to the table, sat down, placed both hands flat on the surface. The wood felt cool, solid, real. Everything on top of it. That was the illusion. The version they had arranged. The version they expected me to accept. A son who was busy. A move that made sense. A vacation that was well-deserved. A mother who would understand. Who would wait. Who would not look too closely. I looked at the receipts again. Then the planner. Then the phone. Then the envelope. And for the first time, I didn't see separate moments. I saw sequence, design, intention. Vanessa hadn't suggested the move. She had structured it, step by step. Money, location, timing. And Daniel, he hadn't been pulled along. He had signed the receipts, taken the flight, stood on that deck, smiled for that camera. There are moments when things become clear, not loud, not dramatic, just final. This was one of them. I didn't feel surprised. That had passed. I didn't feel angry. That would come later. What I felt was something else, something quieter, more precise. Because now, there was nothing left to guess. I understood the timeline. I understood the roles. And I understood exactly when they decided I no longer needed to be part of it.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the thing about patterns. They don't announce themselves. They repeat quietly until one day they line up. And when they do, they don't look like accidents anymore. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. It was Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. Helen had already started preparing the night before. She always did. Said it gave her a head start, though she rarely needed one. By 11 a.m., the kitchen was warm, filled with the smell of turkey, butter, and something sweet baking in the oven. I set the table, 6 plates. Daniel said they'd be here by noon. At 12:15, Helen checked her phone. No message. At 12:40, I called him. It rang, then voicemail. Helen said nothing, just adjusted the napkins again. At 1:10, a message came through, from Vanessa. Change of plans. We're spending Thanksgiving with my parents this year. Totally slipped our minds. Hope you understand. Helen read it once, then again. Then she locked the phone and placed it face down. The food will keep, she said. We ate anyway, 2 plates instead of 6. She wrapped the rest carefully, labeled each container, placed them in the fridge. The next day, I saw photos online. Vanessa's family. A long table, everyone smiling. Daniel sitting beside her father, comfortable, like he had always been there. Helen didn't mention it, neither did I. The second time was Christmas, same year. Vanessa had called a week before, her voice soft, careful. Daniel's been really overwhelmed with work, she said. We thought it might be better to keep things small this year, just the 2 of us. Helen nodded as she listened. Of course she did. That sounds reasonable, she replied. After the call, she still decorated the tree, hung every ornament, even the ones Daniel made as a child. Crooked edges, faded paint. She placed them front and center. We spent Christmas Eve together, quiet, predictable. The next morning, I made coffee. 2 cups. Helen sat by the window, the tree lights still on. At 10:30, my sister called. "Why didn't you come?" she asked. "Come where?" "The party at Daniel's place." I didn't answer. Later, I saw the photos. Living room full, neighbors, friends, Vanessa in the center, Daniel beside her. A different tree, different decorations, no trace of ours. Helen looked at the photos for a long time. Then she closed the phone. "They must have changed their minds," she said. Not a question, a statement she chose to believe.
Then there was her birthday, last year, 70. Helen didn't ask for much, just dinner. Nothing fancy, she said, just family. She even chose the restaurant, small place, close to home. We arrived 10 minutes early, sat by the window, ordered water, waited. At 6:20, I called Daniel. No answer. At 6:45, the waiter came back. "Would you like to order?" Helen smiled. "Just a little longer." At 7:10, a message came through, from Daniel this time. "Sorry, Mom, got caught up. We'll celebrate soon." No explanation, no details. Helen folded the phone, placed it in her purse. "We can order now," she said. She ordered salmon, her favorite. Barely touched it. When the cake arrived, the waiter asked if we wanted candles. Helen shook her head. No need. Back home, she placed the leftovers in the fridge, same way she always did. Careful, organized, unspoken. There were smaller things too, easier to overlook. Phone calls that ended quickly, visits that felt shorter each time, conversations that stayed on the surface. Vanessa speaking for Daniel, answering questions that weren't directed at her, redirecting plans. Maybe another time. Let's keep it flexible. We'll let you know. And we always waited, because that's what parents do. We wait, we adjust, we make space, even when no one asks us to. The last time, before everything changed, was that dinner, the one I keep returning to, because now I know it wasn't the beginning, it was the confirmation. Everything before it had already been leading there, step by step, holiday by holiday, moment by moment. Not loud enough to confront, not clear enough to accuse, just enough to shift the balance, until one day you're no longer part of the center. You're adjacent, then optional, then nothing. I stood in the kitchen again, the same kitchen, same table, same chair, Helen's chair, empty. The house hadn't changed, but the meaning of it had. I walked to the cabinet, opened it, looked at the 2 cups, still hanging side by side, one used, one untouched. I reached up, took down the second cup, held it for a moment, then placed it back, exactly where it had been. Some things aren't meant to be moved. They're meant to be understood. I turned slightly, looked at the table, at the space where Daniel used to sit, where he used to talk, where he used to belong. And for the first time, I didn't see absence. I saw replacement. I hadn't lost my place overnight. I had been moved, quietly, deliberately, until one day, I was no longer part of the picture, at all. The house felt different the next morning. Not quieter, not louder, just clearer. I woke up at the same time, 5:42, made coffee, 1 cup, sat at the table. But this time I didn't look at the empty chair. I looked at the documents, the envelope, the receipts, the planner, the number. Everything remained where I had placed it. Not as evidence, not yet, just pieces. I reached for the phone, scrolled past Daniel. This time I didn't stop there. I kept going, until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Robert Hayes, Helen's attorney. He had handled our will. Quiet man, precise. The kind who didn't speak unless there was something worth saying. I pressed call. It rang once, then twice. "Margaret?" His voice hadn't changed, still steady. "Yes?"
A pause. "I heard about Helen," he said. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just measured. "I need to review the documents," I said. He didn't ask which ones. "Come by this morning," he replied. His office was the same as I remembered. Dark wood, soft lighting. Everything arranged with intention. He didn't offer condolences again. He didn't need to. He simply gestured for me to sit. I placed my purse on the chair beside me, took out the envelope, the receipts, laid them on the desk. Not dramatically, just enough. He glanced at them, then at me. "Tell me what you've noticed," he said. Not what happened, not what's wrong, just what I had seen.
So I told him. Not everything. Just the structure. The withdrawals, the forwarding address, the timeline, the flight, the silence. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't react. When I finished, he folded his hands, leaned back slightly. "Have you reviewed the most recent version of your estate documents?" he asked. "No. I think you should." He stood, walked to a cabinet, unlocked it, removed a file, set it down in front of me. My name, Helen's name, side by side. I opened it. The pages were familiar, until they weren't. I flipped to the section that mattered. Primary beneficiary, Daniel Collins. That hadn't changed. But below it, there was an addendum, dated 3 weeks ago. The same week as the dinner. The same week as the withdrawals. The same week as the flight. I read it once, then again. The language was precise, controlled. Any transfer of financial authority, asset reallocation, or property claim made without written consent from both parties, Margaret Collins and Helen Collins, shall be considered invalid. I looked up. Robert was watching me. "Helen requested that addition," he said. "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the file again, pulled out another document, a request form, unsigned, partially filled, authorization for access, account control, name listed, Daniel Collins, date, blank. I stared at it, then back to Robert. He came in. Robert said, "Daniel." "Yes." "When?" "2 days before your dinner." The room didn't change, but something inside it did. He asked about simplifying things. Robert continued. "Use that word?" Robert nodded. "Yes." I didn't respond, because I had heard that word before, at my table, from Vanessa. Simplify. She was cautious. Robert added, "Helen?" "Yes." He tapped the addendum lately. "She didn't refuse outright, but she made sure nothing could move without you." I closed the file slowly, set my hand on top of it. Flat. Steady. "She knew," I said. Robert didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. "What happens now?" he asked. I looked at the documents, then at the receipts, then at the envelope. "They're already gone," I said. "Yes." "They think it's done." Another pause. "Yes." I nodded once. That was enough. When I got back home, the house felt the same, but I didn't move around the table this time. I sat down directly in front of it, placed everything in order, planner, receipts, envelope. Now the file. I aligned the edges, straightened the corners, not because it mattered, because it helped me see. Patterns are easier to recognize when nothing overlaps. I opened the file again, read the addendum one more time. Then I closed it,
placed it on top. The final layer. I didn't feel rushed. There was no urgency. That part had passed. What remained was timing. I stood up, walked to the sink, turned on the water, let it run. Then I turned it off again, same as before. But this time, I understood why. Control. That's what this was. Not reaction, not emotion. Control. I dried my hands, looked at the reflection in the window. Unchanged. That was important, because nothing about me needed to change. Only what I did next. I picked up my phone, opened Daniel's contact. Didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled to messages, typed one line, then deleted it. Some conversations aren't meant to happen early. Some truths work better when they arrive, fully formed. I set the phone down again, looked at the table, at the documents, at the evidence, at the structure. Then I looked at the empty chair across from me, and for the first time, I didn't see loss. I saw position. Mine. Exactly where it needed to be. They had already moved. They had already decided. They had already taken what they thought they could. They just didn't know. I had already seen everything. They called 3 days later. Not both of them. Just Daniel. 8:17 p.m. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom? His voice sounded the same. Familiar. Measured. As if nothing had shifted. Yes? A pause. Hey. I've been meaning to call. Of course he had. I imagine you have, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. How are you holding up? He asked. The question came late. Delayed. But practiced. I'm managing, I replied. Neutral. He exhaled softly. Listen. Things got complicated. The trip. I saw the photos. I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt. I just placed the words exactly where they belonged. Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. You did? He asked. Yes. Another pause. Then, it wasn't what it looked like. I didn't respond. Because that sentence doesn't require one. It explains itself. We had this booked for a while. He continued. And with everything happening, Vanessa thought. Vanessa thought. I repeated. Gently. Not correcting. Just placing the phrase back in front of him. He stopped. Just for a moment. Then continued. She thought it would be better to take some space. From your mother's funeral. The words landed quietly. But they didn't move. I know how that sounds. He said quickly. Yes. I replied. You do.
Another silence, this one thinner, more fragile. We're back now, he said. We were actually thinking of stopping by tomorrow. Of course they were. Timing again. Always timing. That won't be necessary, I said. A pause. Mom, I've already spoken with Robert. The name settled between us. Heavy, precise. He didn't speak. I could hear it. The shift. Not in volume, in understanding. What about? He asked carefully. Everything. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. There are moments when explanation weakens the truth. This wasn't one of them. I think there's been some misunderstanding, he said. Of course there had. That's how these things begin. I agree, I said. Another pause. Then, what do you mean? I stood up, walked to the table, looked at the documents. Still arranged. Still aligned. I mean, I said, that you believed certain things were already in motion. No response. You believed access had been arranged. Still nothing. You believed timing would work in your favor. His breathing changed. Subtle, but noticeable. That's not... I saw the authorization request.
I continued. He stopped. I saw the withdrawals. Silence. I saw the forwarding address. Nothing. And I saw the timeline. I let that sit. Didn't rush it. Didn't soften it. You went to Robert's office, I added. His voice came back, but not the same. I was just asking questions. Yes, I said. You were. Another pause. Longer now. Less controlled. You don't understand everything, he said. No, I replied. I understand exactly enough. That was the difference. I didn't need all of it. Just the structure. Just the intention. Vanessa thought, yes, I said again. Quiet. Final. He stopped. Because there was nowhere left to place her in that sentence. I didn't do anything wrong, he said. Not defensive. Not yet. Just uncertain. You signed the withdrawals. Silence. You boarded the flight. Nothing. You stood on that deck. A breath. You smiled for that camera. The line went quiet. Not disconnected. Just still. I trusted you, he said finally. It wasn't what I expected. Or maybe it was. I considered it. Then I nodded. Yes, I said you did. That was the truth. He had trusted me. To not look too closely. To not ask too early. To not understand in time. That kind of trust is very specific. And very useful.
Mom, we can fix this, he said. There it was, the shift, from explanation to negotiation. No, I replied. Not cold, not sharp, just clear. It's already fixed. Another pause. What does that mean? I looked at the file, the addendum, the language, precise, controlled. It means, I said, that nothing moves without my consent. Silence. It means the accounts remain where they are. Nothing. It means the house stays exactly as it is. A breath. And it means, I added, that your name is no longer the only one that matters. He didn't speak. Not immediately. When he did, his voice had changed. What did you do? A fair question. I placed my hand on the file. Flat. Steady. I adjusted the structure, I said. Not a lie. Not the full truth. Just enough. You can't just... I can. That was the first time I interrupted him. Not loudly, not forcefully, just precisely. Another silence. Then, you're overreacting. Of course. That word, it always arrives eventually. I'm responding, I said. That's all. You're making this bigger than it is. No, I replied. I'm seeing it for what it is. The difference matters, even if he didn't understand it. Vanessa didn't mean Daniel. His name stopped him. Completely. We're not going to do that. That was the closest I came to raising my voice. Still calm, still measured, but unmistakable. She made decisions, I continued, and you followed them. Silence. You didn't ask questions. Nothing. You didn't hesitate. A breath. And you didn't show up. That was the only part that mattered. Everything else just confirmed it. The line stayed quiet. Then, what happens now? He asked. I looked around the house. The same walls. The same table. The same chair. Everything exactly where it belonged. I continue, I said. With what? My life. Another pause. And us? He asked. I considered that. Not emotionally, structurally. We'll see, I said. Honest. Measured. Uncommitted. Because some things don't need to be decided immediately. They just need to be understood. I'll call you later, he said. You can try, I replied. Not a dismissal, not an invitation, just a statement. The line disconnected. Quietly. I placed the phone down, looked at the table, at the documents,
at the space across from me. Still empty, still unchanged. But now, correct. They thought I was the one being left behind. They didn't realize I was the one who chose not to follow.
He didn't call the next day, or the day after that. But something changed. Not in my house, in the silence around it. On the fourth morning, I found an email. Subject line, "We need to talk." No greeting, no softness, just that. I opened it, read it once, closed it, didn't respond. By the end of the week, a second message arrived, this one longer, more careful. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Vanessa and I would like to come by and clear things up. We don't want this to get worse than it already is." I read it twice. Not for the words, for the tone. It had shifted. Less confident, more uncertain. I placed the phone down. Didn't answer. They came anyway. Saturday afternoon, 2:14 p.m. I knew the exact time because I was standing at the kitchen sink when the doorbell rang. I dried my hands, didn't rush, walked to the door, opened it. Daniel stood there, Vanessa beside him. She was dressed the same way she always was, composed, controlled. But there was something different. Not visible, just missing. Confidence doesn't disappear loudly. It thins around the edges. "Mom," Daniel said. I nodded. "Daniel." I looked at Vanessa. "Vanessa." She smiled, a version of the one I had seen before, but not quite the same. "Margaret," she said. I stepped aside. "Come in." They walked into the house like guests, not like family. That part had already changed. I didn't over coffee, didn't gesture toward the table. I remained standing. So did they. That made things easier. No one had to pretend comfort. Daniel cleared his throat. "We didn't want to do this over the phone." "I understand," I said. Vanessa stepped forward slightly. "We think there's been some confusion," she said. Of course. That word again. Confusion. It's a useful word. It softens intention, reframes structure, turns decisions into accidents. I didn't respond. She continued. "The timing of everything, it just didn't line up the way we expected." Expected. Another interesting word. I looked at her. Directly. For the first time since she walked in. "And what exactly did you expect?" I asked. Her smile held, but only just. Daniel stepped in. "Mom, we're not here to argue." "No," I said. "You're here to explain." Silence. That was the difference. They had come with a plan, but not with answers. Vanessa adjusted her posture. Small movement, controlled. "We made decisions based on what made sense for our future," she said. There it was, clearer this time. No apology, no hesitation, just logic. "And where did I fit into that?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Daniel did. "We assumed." "Yes," I said, quiet, stopping him before the sentence could finish. "You assumed." That word doesn't need anything added to it. It carries enough on its own. Vanessa's expression shifted, slightly. "We didn't think it would affect you like this," she said. I nodded once. "I'm sure you didn't." Because that was the truth. They hadn't considered it. Not deeply, not seriously. Because I wasn't part of the equation anymore. I walked past them, back to the table. The documents were still there, exactly as I had left them. I didn't touch them. Not yet. "You came to Robert's office," I said. Behind me, I heard Daniel shift his weight. "Yes?" "You asked about access." A pause. "I asked about options." "Options," I repeated. Same word, different meaning.
I turned slightly. Not fully. Just enough. Helen added an addendum, I said. Vanessa's eyes flickered. There it was. Recognition. Small, but real. Daniel looked between us. What addendum? I watched his face. Carefully. There are moments when people reveal themselves. Not through what they say. Through what they don't know. And in that moment, he didn't know. Not everything. Not the full structure. Vanessa had known. He hadn't. Interesting. Nothing moves without my consent, I said. Simple. Clear. Final. Silence. Daniel frowned. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to, I replied. It just has to hold. Vanessa stepped forward again. This isn't necessary, she said. Her voice was tighter now. Less polished. We're trying to move forward. Yes, I said. You are. Another pause. But not with me. That part landed. Heavier than the rest. Daniel exhaled. This isn't fair. Fair. Another word people reach for when structure no longer benefits them. I'm not measuring fairness, I said. I'm measuring clarity. He shook his head. We didn't do anything illegal. No. I agreed. You didn't. That wasn't the point. Illegality is loud. This had been quiet. Planned. Layered. More effective. Vanessa crossed her arms. A subtle shift. Defensive. You're making this into something it's not, she said. No. I replied. I'm seeing it without the version you prepared. That was the difference. Between what happened and what they expected me to believe had happened. Daniel looked at me. Really looked. For the first time since he arrived. So what now? He asked. I considered the question. Not emotionally. Structurally. The house stays as it is, I said. The accounts remain unchanged. And your access? I paused. Just long enough. Is no longer assumed. Silence. Not resistance. Not yet. Just absence. Vanessa's voice came next. Lower. Controlled. You're cutting us out. I looked at her. No, I said. I'm removing the assumption that you were ever in. That landed differently, because it was precise. Daniel stepped back slightly, as if distance might help him understand. It didn't. Mom. I didn't respond. Not to the word, not to the tone, because those things belong to a version of us that no longer applied. I'm not asking you to agree, I said. I'm informing you of the structure. That was all this was now. Structure. Not emotion. Not history. Not expectation. Just alignment. Vanessa's expression hardened. Not completely, but enough. This isn't over, she said. I nodded. You're right. Because she was. It wasn't. But not in the way she meant. They stood there for another moment. Then Daniel turned. Vanessa followed. No goodbye. No resolution. The door closed behind them. Quietly. The house returned to stillness. The same stillness, but not the same meaning. I walked back to the table. sat down, looked at the documents, then at the empty chair. Still empty, still unchanged. But now, accurate. I reached up, took down the second cup, the one that had remained untouched, held it for a moment, then placed it in the cabinet. Not on the hook, inside, out of sight. Some things don't need to remain visible to be understood. I closed the cabinet, turned off the kitchen light, and for the first time since the funeral, the silence didn't feel like something I had been left in. It felt like something I had chosen. Because in the end, it wasn't about losing them. It was about finally seeing that they had already left and deciding not to follow.